Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu.
The bill passed the test vote. Welcome to the Tuesday edition as legislation to reopen the government clears a regulatory hurdle in a squeaker, setting up a likely full passage of this bill to reopen government before the hour is out. We're going to find out together with an update ahead from Bloomberg's Washington correspondent, Tyler Kendall. She's at the White House, which played a prominent role in getting Republicans to a yes here. Insights ahead from Republican Congresswoman Erin Houchin of Indiana. She'll talk to us before she goes to the floor to vote, and we'll have analysis from our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis are with us for the hour as we talk about the policy that drives the markets, the intersection of Washington and Wall Street. And here we go again today with some important voting that's going to take place this hour before we're done. Having seen a rule pass on the House floor last hour that gives us a sense of how this might go, reminding you that we are in a partial government shutdown right now. And what's about to take place is likely going to end that for at least a couple of weeks' time. Remembering a 2-week continuing resolution in place for the Department of Homeland Security, all the other agencies, the other half dozen or so, fully funded. But that 2-week CR on DHS could bring us back to this same point just days from now. President Trump talked to reporters in the Oval Office ahead of his evening on the phone with Anna Paulina Luna and Tim Burchett. He managed to dislodge those 2 Republican votes ahead of the rule. Speaker Johnson flipped 2 others on the floor to get us to this point. Here's the president from yesterday.
I spoke with Speaker Johnson. I spoke with Leader Thune. And I think they're pretty close to a resolution. You know, we were at 5.6% GDP, and we lost 1.5 points because of the 42-day shutdown. Think of that. We would have been at 7. Nobody ever saw a number like 7. It's very bad for our country. But despite that, we have the highest numbers we've ever had. I spoke with Senator Schumer numerous times, and I don't think they want to see a shutdown either.
Let's bring in Bloomberg's Washington correspondent, Tyler Kendall, who's on a chilly North Lawn right now, waiting for the rest of this to take place. Tyler, it's good to have you back with us. The president has what he likes to call signing time on the schedule for later in the day. Is he expecting to or hoping to sign this bill?
Well, he definitely would like to, Joe, because as we've heard from President Trump before, he is hoping to end this partial government shutdown as quickly as possible, as we've already started to see some of the impacts pile up, including the delay to the BLS's jobs report that was set to be released later this week. The thing is, President Trump is personally involved now as these negotiations are heading towards their final vote. As you mentioned, we have already cleared that key procedural hurdle, so this is looking very likely for later on this afternoon. And the president picked up the phone directly, calling some of these holdouts in order to make the deal, because keep in mind, this really was only negotiated between the White House and Senate Democrats, which means the House didn't really have a say in how things ultimately ended up happening. And that's why we started to see some of those last minute wrinkles. And while it looks like there appeared to pass this package now that would fund the majority of agencies through September 30th, the fiscal year, but keep DHS funding only through February 13th, the work is still cut out ahead of them, particularly when it comes to the House, because now we're going to be on this clock, this timeline, only 10 days to reach a deal on full fiscal year funding for the Department of Homeland Security, but also what potential curbs to immigration and customs enforcement is ultimately going to look like, since we know some Republicans, including House conservatives, have balked at some of the demands from Democrats, including new requirements when it comes to warrants and a prohibition on federal agents wearing masks. So, Joe, we should say that we did see some perhaps bipartisan movement yesterday, applaud from both sides of the aisle, when the DHS Secretary Kristi Noem announced that there would be using body cameras on the ground in Minneapolis. But Democrats say they still want to see those changes codified in federal law.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned all of that, Tyler. We spoke with Senator John Cornyn a little bit earlier today, and he's a non-starter on all of these. He called the unmasking of federal agents an insult to their professionalism, noting, to your point, Kristi Noem is going to have body cameras in place beginning in Minneapolis. Do we know where the administration stands on these other angles? Where's the president on masking? Has he ever said that?
This is going to be a critical question. Now, yesterday he was asked specifically about body cameras, and he did applaud that move. But, Joe, we're going to have to see how the contours of a potential deal ultimately come together here, because, as we mentioned, this is a very short timeline. It's going to be hard for everybody to get ultimately what they want out of this. And we know that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is speaking directly with this White House and is in a pretty precarious position right now within his own party, as he has been leading these negotiations. So we're going to be watching for clues over the coming days on how House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries gets roped into this, to see what Democrats in both chambers are going to be willing to compromise when it comes to the future of curbs on immigration enforcement, considering that we know that this is a big pillar of the Trump administration and what Republicans would like to run on as we head into the midterms. It is going to be contentious, no doubt.
Well, this is why a lot of Republicans, by the way, were saying 2 weeks was not enough procedurally. I believe it was Patrick McHenry who said on Friday they need a deal by the end of this week to get that done by the end of next week, just the procedural elements that go into all of this. Hey, Tyler, I'm looking at the president's schedule today. He's in the building right now, unless you can tell us they wrapped the meeting with the president of Colombia. No press inside? Do we know what they're doing?
No press inside. The Colombian President Petro arrived here around 11 a.m. Eastern, so we're looking at a meeting that's going over 2 hours, it appears at the moment, behind closed doors. And this was a highly anticipated meeting between the two leaders and was seen as a potential reset for relations after tensions have really escalated over the past few weeks. Of course, as you well know, the Colombian president has been highly critical of the U.S.'s operation to capture Nicolas Maduro, and President Trump himself hasn't ruled out the potential for military intervention in Colombia, as he is urging the country to stem the flow of illicit narcotics into the U.S. I'll also add that on the table is that the U.S. had decertified Colombia as a trusted partner when it comes to curbing illicit drugs and has lobbied sanctions aimed directly at Petro from the U.S. Treasury Department. So there's a lot that could be on the table today. We did get a readout from the Colombian government side previewing what they hope to talk about in the meeting, which includes trade, infrastructure, migration, security, and then interestingly enough, relations with China and Venezuela. So there is a whole lot on the table that they're probably discussing behind closed doors right now.
Fascinating. I can't wait to hear about the readout. If they do let reporters in, Tyler will be in the Oval Office, and I'll be deeply curious to follow you in there, Tyler. On the, of course, behalf of our audience, we'll stay close to Tyler Kendall at the White House. The president on Truth Social just last evening, I am working hard with Speaker Johnson, he wrote, to get the current funding deal, which passed in the Senate last week, though he says through the House and to my desk, where I will sign it into law immediately. We heard from Speaker Johnson a short time ago before that rules vote. Here's what he said.
We have 2 weeks now to negotiate in good faith on both sides. The White House and Senate Democrats are going to engage in that, but the House Republicans are as well. We have to make sure we maintain the important parameters here. We can't go down the road of amnesty. If the Democrats do insist on keeping the government shut down, their pointless obstruction is going to have no effect on border security, which we have done, we've secured, or immigration enforcement.
We bring in a voice from Speaker Johnson's Republican conference. Congresswoman Erin Houchin is back with us, Republican from Indiana's 9th District. Congresswoman, it's good to see you. I know it's a very busy day, so thanks for sharing some time with us here on Bloomberg TV and radio. We understand the vote on the underlying bill will take place before this hour is out. Can you give us a sense of what the timeline looks like here, and are you a yes?
Yes, I will. Thank you. I will be a yes vote on the package. I think the president and the speaker have worked very hard to not only get all of our appropriations past the House, but also working with the Senate to try to get this done. I think you'll see here shortly before the end of the hour, you will see that Republicans will be voting for this appropriations measure. We probably will see some Democrats vote for it too, and we will get this bill on its way.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I believe, according to my count, not a single Democrat voted for the rule. And I know a couple of Republicans had to change their votes to make that happen. Is that your expectation, that once we get to the underlying bill, you'll have some Democrats cross the aisle to vote with you?
I do think so, because there are Democrats that have community projects that should be funded through these appropriations bills. So if they vote against the appropriations package, then they would be voting against getting tax dollars back to their own districts for projects that have been on hold for 3 years. So I do think that we will see, certainly the rule is a procedural vote that Democrats universally vote against. If the Democrats were in the majority, you would see Republicans universally voting against the procedural rule. But once a bill goes to the floor, I think they're freer to vote for those things, and you will see us pick up some Democrats.
Well, this is how the game is played, right? I'm just curious if any deals were made today, Congresswoman, for better or worse. The Speaker had to flip Andy Ogles and John Rose. Was there anything that was agreed upon that we should know about or that might change the political landscape in this legislation?
Not to my knowledge. I certainly wasn't part of those conversations, but I'm glad to see that our colleagues supported the rule. It's an important procedural vote that allows us to move forward on debate and vote on the appropriations package. So we don't like to see our own members holding up our rules. I serve on the Rules Committee. That serves an important function in Congress, especially as a tool of the majority. So, again, I don't know what those conversations were. I wasn't privy to those, but glad to see our Republicans came together as they usually do, and we'll have this vote and we'll pass this government funding bill. Republicans will have done their jobs, even despite some of the rhetoric from the left. I think some of them will vote for it too.
Well, Congresswoman, I salute you for your duty on the Rules Committee. That has really become the battleground in the U.S. House for so many issues before it ever gets to the floor. Bring us in the room, if you would, because this was not the knockdown, drag-out fight a lot of people thought that we'd be seeing. Jim McGovern yelling to the rafters at 2 o'clock in the morning. It actually ended up being a pretty civilized debate, and I'm wondering what that tells us about the tone around this particular issue when it comes to ICE enforcement, Homeland Security in the House.
Well, I would say that oftentimes we have these conversations that with Republicans and Democrats, and Chairman Cole and Ranking Member DeLauro on appropriations worked very closely together with their Senate Democrat and Republican counterparts through this whole process. And so what you saw, I think, was not wanting to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's take the good things that are in this legislation and in this appropriations package, these big wins that we have for the country, less spending, meeting our priorities. And certainly we are pleased when Democrats want to come on board and work with us on these things versus working against us. Circumstances around the country have risen the temperature on some of the issues, like the immigration and customs enforcement. Again, we're working through those, as is President Trump. And I think what you'll see today, again, is a bipartisanship on the House floor, which honestly, we have more bipartisan votes that come across the House floor typically than we do partisan votes. It's just typically that's not what is covered in the news, but glad to be talking about it today.
Well, yeah, we like to wonk out on policy, as you know, Congresswoman, and I'm curious to what extent we'll be able to extend that bipartisanship to the debate around ICE restrictions. You've heard the demands from Democrats. We talked about them right before you joined us with Tyler Kendall, and one of them includes demasking of ICE agents. Senator John Cornyn told us earlier that was an insult. Retraining for de-escalation. You've already checked off body cameras, I think, on behalf of the department with Kristi Noem's announcement yesterday. But there could be other things that are done here. I'm just wondering what's realistic that you would vote yes for in a piece of legislation?
Well, I don't like to predict what should or will not be in or out of a bill before I see that and decide how I'm going to vote. But I will say that these conversations are ongoing about what this will look like moving forward. It is helpful when the state and local governments, as we have seen in other parts of the country, like in Washington, D.C. and in Memphis, even in blue areas of the country, there is cooperation with Immigration and Customs Enforcement that has resulted in getting illegal aliens who've caused harm to American citizens out of the country. It does help when we have that cooperation with state and local government. I'm going to continue to encourage that, as is President Trump back in Minnesota. That, I think, will get the temperature down. We need to reduce the rhetoric around ICE, too. I've worked with in child services before. I've worked with law enforcement. They have a very, very difficult job. We don't need to be making this job more difficult. And so I do hope that we'll see that cooperation at the state and local level turn the temperature down and the rhetoric down so that we can let ICE do their good work. I mean, we did not see Democrats being outraged at Laken Riley's death at the hands of a criminal illegal alien. Those are the kinds of people we need to be focused on getting out of the country. And I hope that both parties could rally around those efforts.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We saw some Democrats vote for the Laken Riley Act. I wonder, is 2 weeks enough, Congresswoman, to figure this all out? John Thune's already talking about the potential for additional CRs on Homeland.
Well, one good thing is in the One Big Beautiful Bill, we did fund border security and immigrations and customs enforcement. So when the Speaker says that this is a performative fight for the Democrats, that's not that's certainly correct. We've already done that funding, so that's going to be funded no matter what we do. But a no vote would put FEMA at risk. It would put the Coast Guard at risk and TSA at risk of not having funding, which I hope that our Democrat counterparts would not want to see happen. So when we're having these debates, there's always a lot of moving parts. As you say, you like to geek out on these policy provisions, and we're always working on how we can come to an agreement. When we have this bill, this big package, is it 2 weeks enough? Probably not. I think we probably need more time, but we will get there, as Republicans always do.
Well, it's great to spend some time with you, Congresswoman. It sounds like there's going to be a vote about a half an hour from now. Is that accurate?
Yeah, about 1:40, I think, is when we're supposed to have the vote in mind. So be watching for hopefully a passage of our appropriations bills.
We'll be ready to geek out with you anytime. Thanks for spending some time with us, as always. Erin Houchin, Congresswoman, Republican from Indiana, with us live on Capitol Hill. As we anticipate then, you just got it straight from the source. 1:40 p.m. Eastern time is what we expect on a vote here on the underlying bill. That would mean the president signs, presumably in his signing time a couple of hours from now at the White House. The government's reopened by the time you get home for dinner. So this could happen very quickly here, following a bit of cajoling that needed to happen on the rule last hour. We're going to play this to the panel coming up. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne, Zaino, and Rick Davis are with us as we consider the idea of regular order. Not so much this time around, but a government that'll be reopened. We'll have more ahead, only on Bloomberg. We do have a vote about 20 minutes away here, as we just learned live on the air following a rule vote last hour that passed in a squeaker. Congresswoman Erin Houchin, the Republican from Indiana, confirming for us 1:40 p.m. Eastern time, members have been told to prepare to vote on the bill to reopen the government. Well, it's a partial shutdown, so we'll reopen the rest of the government, as it were, and that will get the clock ticking on a 2-week continuing resolution for the Department of Homeland Security, so lawmakers can negotiate restrictions, presumably on ice. This is where we have left things as we assemble our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino are with us. Jeanne is our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. Rick is a Republican strategist partner at Stonecourt Capital. You could both weigh in on Bitcoin as you like, but I'm a little bit more curious at the moment about what's going to happen on the House floor, because it does appear that Mike Johnson has the votes. Jeanne, will Democrats help him?
I think we're going to see some crossover. I do think some of them have said it publicly, and you were just talking about some of them. So I do think we're going to see some Democrats vote for it. I think the rule is one thing. They stay together on that. But on this, they're going to fund. I think but some will not. So it's going to be a split.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Rick, on this interesting scenario where you vote no on the rule, but you vote yes on the underlying bill? Is that what we see today?
Yeah, two totally separate strategies. This one for final passage. I would be surprised if there are not dozens of Democrats who vote for this package. The story that not very many people are talking about is the reason we're actually here, actually passing these appropriations bills, is because in the negotiations, Democrats did extremely well in getting their health agenda embedded into this budget. 5, 6 different programs that the President of the United States zeroed out in the last budget were reinstated in these budgets. Democrats aren't taking a victory lap yet, but the reality is there are a lot of them who really look forward to seeing this bill pass, and that these programs that the president tried to get rid of come back to life.
Really interesting. There was some confusion, I think, among Democrats here. Jeanne, there was a whip alert that for Democrats urged a no vote on the rule, but no guidance on the underlying bill, as Rick is describing here. Rosa DeLauro announced she'd vote for the package. Hakeem Jeffries, not so much. What's the confusion all about, knowing that essentially Chuck Schumer cut a deal with President Trump to get us to this point without Hakeem Jeffries' involvement?
Yeah, I think I think was not a smart strategic move, but they're getting it over the fence, so that's okay. But I think on the rule, it's pretty traditional. They stick together, but Hakeem Jeffries specifically did not whip and did not give any guidance on the actual bill, in part for some of the reasons that Rick was just talking about. And you do have people, and you just heard it in your previous interview, like Rosa DeLauro, who has worked very closely across the aisle in both the House and with her counterparts in the Senate to craft these bills. And then you have other people, including two former members of leadership in Clyburn and Hoyer, who have said, vote for the bill when this comes up. So I do think there's a chance we see 50, 60. It's hard to know how many Democrats who vote for the bill, because these bills have other things in them. Even though they don't have what Democrats ultimately want as it pertains to ICE, they do allow this, 10 days now for them to negotiate that out.
Yeah. Rick talked about some of the victories that Democrats have scored in these bills that we maybe haven't heard so much about. One of them might also be what's not in this bill, Rick. That's the SAVE Act, this voter ID legislation that Anna Paulina Luna and Tim Burchett were on the fence over here. They were not going to vote yes till President Trump cut a deal with them. Apparently, there is some understanding that there will be a separate vote on the SAVE Act. To what extent could that see the light of day after this?
Yeah, it's interesting how this became such a important issue in getting this package to the floor. John Rose, who was the vote that flipped that allowed the rule to get out, was also backing the SAVE Act. This notion of having a national voter ID. Much more popular amongst MAGA voters in the House of Representatives than what we've got in the United States Senate with the Republican Party. But at the end of the day, promises are being made in the House for a vote. Highly unlikely that Johnson's going to have the votes to pass that, as we've seen in this instance. 2 and you're done. My guess is there are a couple of Republicans who will unlikely vote for this in the House of Representatives, stopping the momentum for it. And I would say close to dead on arrival in the Senate, only because you need a passel of Democrats, 5 to pass it, and you're not going to get those. So it's a bit of an exercise. If there's a performative aspect of this budget, it's this one issue. And I guess they think it's good politics at home, but it's unlikely to become law.
You agree with that one, Jeanne? The SAVE Act is something that's been getting a lot of talk on social media. It's not often where I have people randomly kind of asking me about, what are you hearing about this? This is something that's grabbed the attention of a lot of people when it comes to voter ID.
It has. And, we even heard Ron Johnson say, well, if Democrats are going to demand things on ICE, then we're going to demand things like ending sanctuary cities and passing the SAVE Act. And so it is on both, in both the House and the Senate. You're hearing about it. I don't think it has a chance in heck of getting through the Senate, because I can't imagine you're going to get Democratic votes on that. And also, given what has happened in just the last few days in terms of the president yesterday, as we talked about, calling for nationalization of elections in the United States, at the raid the other day in Fulton County in Georgia. These kinds of things, the demands by the DOJ for voter rolls, are making it very difficult for Democrats, and I'm certain some Republicans in the middle, to allow for a movement forward on any kind of nationalization of voting. And while process-wise, of course, if the Congress passes and the president signs, that's okay. But there is a huge concern here going into the midterm that the president is working, because he is deeply concerned that the Republicans are in really big trouble when it comes to the election. And of course, the polls now suggest if something doesn't change in the next 10 months, he's in deep trouble, and there's concern he's going to take steps to ensure that he's got some control over this, and that involves centralization and nationalization of voting.
Jeanne's referring to comments the president made on the Dan Bongino program yesterday. The former deputy FBI director is back on his show or podcast, whatever we call it. We should take over the voting, he said, Rick, in at least 15 places, the Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. This is obviously not something that is out of the conservative gospel when we consider states' rights and, in fact, the United States Constitution. John Thune weighed in on this, Rick. He was asked about the SAVE Act and what the president said about nationalizing elections. He said, I'm supportive of only citizens voting, showing ID at polling places. I think that makes sense, which is what the bill under consideration would do. But I am not in favor of federalizing elections. I think that is a constitutional issue. Did he just put this to bed?
Yeah, I think he put it to bed as far as any legislative effort. But you really wonder what this administration is willing to do on its own, right? We've seen them stretch the roles of the presidency to assume many traditionally roles of Congress. And so I don't think that will slow the White House down. They're going to continue to talk about these issues. I wouldn't be surprised that the Fulton County investigation and the DOJ grabbing their ballot rolls, that could likely happen in other places. It's certainly not the only place that the president complained about the outcome of the election in 2020. And look, we've been hearing about this since 2020. I suspect we're going to be continuing to hear about it all the way through 2028. How this can impact the midterms is a little bit questionable to me because it seems too late to actually enact any kind of voting activity that would be considered federalizing the act of voting, which is clearly what the president is attempting to do. Doesn't do him any good if it's after the midterms because he won't be on the ballot, and it will have resulted in probably a negative connotation of voters. I mean, this does have an impact on how people feel about the president, the Republican Party, and voters. And when we turn the party upside down and say one day we're for states' rights, but the next we say we're only for states' rights and states I win, isn't a confidence builder to the American electorate.
Spending time with Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino. There's been one other breaker that came off Capitol Hill today, Jeanne, that I need to ask you about quickly before you go. And that's going to be testimony by Bill and Hillary Clinton. The House Oversight Committee has put dates on it, February 26 and 27. The chair, James Comer, quoted by the Oversight Committee Twitter handle. Once it became clear, he says, we would hold them in contempt. The Clintons completely caved and will appear for transcribed, filmed depositions this month, unquote. The Post says no one is above the law. What will Americans see when a former president, former Secretary of State sit down before the Oversight Committee?
You know, I think the Clintons made the right decision. I think they should testify. I think when you are called, you should. And I would hope that James Comer takes as tough of a stand on everybody who has had relationships, as we have seen in the latest dump and the ones previously of the Epstein files, and probably more to come if at least some of the victims have their way. He should be equally as tough on everybody else to be called, including the current president of the United States, who the New York Times said was mentioned in the latest batch, I think something like 4,300 times. So yes, the Clintons should testify, and so too should the other people implicated if Congress indeed is going to be working to pass legislation that pertains to making sure something this egregious doesn't happen again, as it has with the Epstein files and the Epstein issue from start to finish over the last 20 years with 1,000 or more young women who were victimized in this horrific situation.
Great conversation, as always, with Rick and Jeanne. Thank you both. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeanne Zaino and Rick Davis with us here on Balance of Power. We're getting to that magic moment in the U.S. House. As we mentioned, a floor vote is set for just moments from now to reopen the portions of government that have been closed since last week. And, of course, we're going to be considering the future of the Department of Homeland Security. That one is zeroed out. That's just a flat continuing resolution for 2 weeks while lawmakers presumably negotiate new restrictions on ICE. I asked Senator John Cornyn about that negotiation, the Republican from Texas running for re-election, suggesting his opposition to any number of ideas, including removing masks from ICE agents. Listen.
I'm always for seeing how we can improve current operations, and that includes ICE. And I believe Mr. Homan, who's now in charge up in Minnesota, at Minneapolis, has said the same thing. But I don't believe there is enough time to open this whole range of topics, nor do I think we should, because these are professional law enforcement officers. One of the main problems and what's happened in places like Minneapolis is these are sanctuary jurisdictions. They don't cooperate with law enforcement at the federal level. And so ICE has no alternative but to make these detentions in the general population. And of course, you have various instigators interrupting and interceding, sometimes with disastrous consequences. So I don't think, I think while certainly these institutional reforms are important, and I would support trying to make it better, this unfortunately is part of the same sort of strain of thought that gave us defund the police and abolish ICE. And I think we have to enforce the law, and that's what President Trump believes as well.
Are you, just to be clear, open to demasking ICE agents when they're working in the field?
I think that's an insult to ICE agents. We know that ICE agents are going to be targeted by some of these instigators. What I call really, they are essentially asking for anarchy, certainly chaos, because if we abandon the rule of law, that's all we have left. And so these ICE agents are being targeted by some of the anti-ICE instigators, and I think in some instances their identity should be protected. But this is just, to me, just a ridiculous request.
Wow. Well, just to be clear, before we move on to some other issues here, Senator, following these two fatal shootings that we saw in Minneapolis, you don't feel any different about restrictions on ICE?
Well, I think the main thing that needs to be done is that the Minneapolis and Minnesota needs to quit refusing to cooperate with federal law enforcement officers. You don't see this happening in Texas because when illegal aliens are apprehended for some state or local violation, they are routinely handed over to ICE at the jail and then subject to deportation. But when local law enforcement or state law enforcement in some of these sanctuary jurisdictions don't do it, ICE has no alternative but to try to go knock on a door and make an arrest when they believe they have an illegal alien evading apprehension, So I think, unfortunately, in both of these instances, these individuals did not cooperate with law enforcement, and unfortunately, when that happens, tragedies like this occur, which are regrettable. But I think the answer to it is for these sanctuary jurisdictions to cooperate with federal law enforcement so that federal immigration laws can be enforced, hopefully without these kind of tragedies occurring.
There's the take from Senator John Cornyn. You can hear that full interview, by the way, on the late edition of Balance of Power. It starts 5 p.m. here on Bloomberg TV and radio. We can tell you the House has started voting right on time, as we mentioned, around 1:40 p.m. Eastern. And here we go with a live view of the House floor. This is the vote that would reopen the portions of government that have been left closed, and a continuing resolution, a 2-week CR for the Department of Homeland Security. I want to mention, before we compare notes with Jim Messina, and I've been looking forward to this conversation, an important interview that is on the way with the CEO and president of Novo Nordisk, a company, of course, that is in the news today with a major stock move based on its forecast. Mike Doustdar is going to be sitting down with Romaine Bostick and Katie Greifeld. That's about 10 minutes from now. Jim Messina, of course, the Democratic strategist, the brains behind the Barack Obama 2012 re-election campaign, and the founder of Messina Group, is with us in studio right now to talk about this delicate moment in American politics. Jim, it's great to see you. Thanks for being with us in studio, as always.
My pleasure.
Hope your year is starting off well. It's really cold around here. You don't live in Washington anymore. It's not always like this, Jim, as you know. We're encased in ice. I don't know how anyone's supposed to get anything done around here, but it appears they're going to pass this legislation today.
Yeah.
We're probably going to come back in another 2 weeks or so and do this all over
10
again,
days.
right? Is that how you figure?
Yeah, 10-day extension, and we're going to be right back at this, having the same debate on DHS and ICE reform. I wish they would have done it now and get this over with, but they're going to pass it. We're going to now go into conference and hope we can iron some of these details out.
Well, so how does this debate unfold? You heard John Cornyn just now. I realize he's a Texas Republican running for re-election.
Yeah.
But he says that the idea of demasking ICE agents is an insult to those agents. Are Democrats about to be disappointed in this debate?
I don't think so. I mean, I think take away the politics, because Senator Cornyn's in a very tough primary, so he has to sound a little more right-wing in his Texas primary. So I get that. But what the country wants, we should go back to what voters want, Joe. And what voters want is some common sense reform. They want the laws enforced. They want illegals to be taken out of our country, but they don't want people to run around without warrants. They don't want people to not have masks. They want body cams. They want what normal police officers have. Normal police officers have body cams and warrants and IDs. Why wouldn't we do exactly the same for ICE?
Sure. You just wonder if there's going to be any motion in negotiations when we have a major lack of trust on Capitol Hill and a Congress that's happy to do CRs for the rest of the year. I mean, could we be in a perpetual homeland CR?
I mean, if we are, the Republicans are going to lose the House.
Yeah.
And you cannot, at some point, you have to run for re-election saying you did something. And you and I, who follow this every single day, couldn't pass a lie detector on what the Republican House has done.
Oh, wow. That's quite a statement. I want you to listen to the newest member of Congress. Maybe you've met him. Maybe you helped him. A Democrat from Texas named Christian Menifee was sworn in last evening, elected over the weekend in a special, strident in his language about controlling these ICE raids. Here's what he said.
You can't take something that was created and has been radicalized to this level that has harmed so many people and try to have minor reforms on it in a way that you think is going to protect people. I think that they are far past the line. And after folks are executed in the street, it's time to tear it down.
Executed in the street. He said, tear it down to the studs. He used the words, abolish ICE. Is that going to be the mantra, or does that make you worry that it sounds a lot like defund the police?
We should not abolish ICE. What we should do is real reform, some very common sense reform that Americans want. And that's really easy to do. You and I could write it out on a piece of paper right now and vote 2-0 and get this thing done. But I don't think abolishing ICE is the Democratic message, nor do I think it should be.
You're going to be hearing members of Congress say this. How does that impact the debate as we go through the midterm cycle? This is an issue when it comes to immigration that helped re-elect the president, and it's one that has been dogging his administration right now. Do Democrats run the risk of screwing up the messaging?
Well, look, what is true is we're only here right now, to your point, because the president has screwed up the politics. And he's now saying to his party, we got to fix this. His numbers on immigration went from plus 15 in the country now to minus 10. The country does not like what they're seeing on TV. You can't hide from this. And they want some real reform, and there's going to be a political price to be paid to anyone who fights that reform.
Yeah, interesting. We're talking about the prospect of nationalizing elections on this program today.
No, there's a terrible idea.
I never thought we'd have this conversation. I don't think that many Republicans or Democrats would be in favor of it, but the president did float that idea on the Dan Bongino program yesterday. It was kind of interesting that he is talking to his former deputy FBI director following the raids that we saw in Fulton County. I want to be careful here and not paraphrase. Listen to what exactly Donald Trump said about nationalizing elections.
The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. And we have states that are so crooked, and they're counting votes. We have states that I won that show I didn't win.
What would happen if we nationalized our elections? And do you take him literally on this?
Oh, I absolutely take him literally. He really wants to. I mean, he's the guy who said there wouldn't be another election if he got elected, right? So he's been saying this. This is not breaking news. I think what is true is no one wants the federal government involved in elections, including the framers of our Constitution, right? We've been very clear about these are state activities. The state should govern them. The state should make these things, and the federal government ought to stay the hell out of it.
Well, but you're a Democratic strategist, and you're sitting on this side of the aisle looking at President Trump begin to dismantle Republican orthodoxy. How do you strategize against that?
By pulling the sane, common sense Republicans into the debate. To say this is exactly what we should not do.
That's what John Thune said.
Exactly right. And you're seeing more and more people join the Democrats and saying, no, this is exactly what we shouldn't do. This is not who we are as Americans. This is not the framers. The only reason you want to nationalize an election, Joe, is if you want to stop elections and if you want to control elections. And our entire system is designed to have checks and balances, to not allow the leader to control his own election. We know what that is. It's called authoritarian government. And I don't think anyone wants that, except for maybe Donald Trump.
This isn't pearl clutching then from progressives. They say he obviously the president still believes that 2020 was rigged. He wants to nationalize this election so he can rig it, and he's got his own personal army that we've seen on the streets of American cities like Minneapolis, because that's what some progressives are saying publicly here. Is that going a little far?
Well, what I think is important is to just put aside the politics for a second, just look what he's saying. And what he's saying is he wants to run the elections, which is A, illegal, B, not what the country wants, and C, it's unconstitutional. And so we ought to fight him all the way on this, and it's an issue that will be joined by a bunch of Republicans.
You're going to be busy, I'm sure, at Messina Group working on midterm messaging. I don't know if you're doing campaigns or issues. You can tell us about that. What will be a more potent issue for you? Will it be the affordability issue, or what we've seen when it comes to ICE and, in this case, the killing of 2 Americans?
1,000 times percent it ought to be the economy. I mean, voters are out there are struggling in this economy. The average swing voter has 2.8 jobs and works, thinks about politics 4 minutes a week. Like, these people are out there suffering, and they want to know what Washington and what their elected officials are going to do to make their lives better. And Democrats ought to hone in on that and stay in that. That doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about ICE. That doesn't mean we shouldn't, fight for what we think is right and common sense reforms. But our continued mantra for the next however many days to the election has to be economic. It has to be about cost of living, because that's what voters are asking for. The president has gone from beating Kamala Harris by 8 points on the economy to now trailing the Democrats by 15 points on the economy, in part because he's doing all these other things, running all over the world, getting involved in these other countries. And voters don't think he's focused on the economy. Joe, if Democrats can be seen as focusing on the economy, we will win in November.
You might have seen the headline today, and it's been confirmed by the Oversight Committee. Bill and Hillary Clinton will be testifying before Jim Comer's committee in February 26th and 27th. This is an Epstein-related conversation, and they were going to be facing criminal contempt otherwise. What are we going to see? 2 stone-faced Clintons not answering questions? How would you advise them to comport themselves in that public forum?
Well, I used to be the deputy chief of staff at the White House. And what I said to people all the time is when people show up with warrants, you answer questions. And be very clear. I think they're doing the right thing to answer these questions. That said, the committee has a responsibility to be bipartisan, to be both sides. Let's be honest. Calling Bill and Hillary up is about trying to change the subject and get the subject off the president and the Epstein files and on to Bill Clinton. They've been trying to get Clinton and Hillary involved in this stuff for 15 years. Why would they stop now? But where are the other people who are involved? Where are the Republicans who are in the Epstein files? It has to be both sides, or the public is going to look at this and say this is just more political BS.
It's great to have you back in the Capitol. Thanks for spending some time with us.
My pleasure.
That's Jim Messina, of course, the Messina Group with us live on Bloomberg TV and radio as part of our conversation here on Balance of Power. The voting continues, and we'll let you know when this bill is up or down on reopening the government today. And I'll meet you back here on the late edition of Balance of Power. Right now, an important conversation that's coming from our world headquarters in New York with the CEO and president of Novo Nordisk. Hand it over to my colleagues, Romaine Bostick and Katie Greifeld. Take it away, guys.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Joe Mathieu. That's right. Joining us now is the CEO of Novo Nordisk. His name is Mike Doustdar. Mike, it's great to have you with us. Let's start with the big news, and that is your annual sales guidance. 2026 sales at constant exchange rates now forecast to fall by 5 to 13%. Analysts had expected a decline of 1.4%. Reading through the statement, it seems like there's 2 issues here: drug pricing and competition. I want to start with competition. We know that Novo Nordisk was first to market with your oral GLP-1. And if you take a look at early script data, for example, it seems like uptake is pretty strong. It's been a strong launch. So with that in mind, what gives you the certainty to say that annual sales will decline to this magnitude? Or are you being intentionally conservative here?
Thanks very much, Katie, for having me. We have spoken actually before, and I've been speaking to 2026 being a year of headwind when it comes to pricing. So there should not be too much surprise when we, of course, announce these numbers, because we have been very transparent with regards to the GLP-1 prices coming down in U.S. across pretty much all the channels. And, of course, this is where the headwind is. But we also have said that at the lower price, we're going to see a much higher volume uptake going forward across the whole world, and not least, of course, in the U.S. And the Wegovy launch is a testament to that. Today, after just 4 weeks of data, we have more than 170,000 people on the pill. This is the most efficacious pill that there is with GLP-1, 17% weight loss, and the customers and the patients out there are really welcoming an affordable pill, which is at the same time very effective. So I'm incredibly optimistic on the future with the market expanding.
I hear what you're saying, that, you know, this was well telegraphed, or at least you had tried to, but you take a look at shares right now, the ADR is currently down about 14%. So traders taken a little bit off guard here. I am curious, you know, that range, that forecast that annual sales will fall 5 to 13%. That's a pretty wide range. How confident are you that 13% could be the trough here?
Well, the range is typically how we use at the beginning of the year. Our midpoint is what we are aiming at, and the range is not any wider than it historically has been. Of course, I can understand that negative numbers are not good news to the market, but once again, this is something that we had anticipated, and the obesity market is quite dynamic. And the reason the range has its numbers on each end is because so many things can happen. We could, of course, see a much even better uptake of the pill or our injectable business. We could, of course, see the opposite. We have felt that this is the right guidance for the market, and that's what we have done today.
Well, Mike, give me a sense, though, as to how prolonged this slump could potentially be. I understand the potential promise of the Wegovy pill and the uptake on that. When does that become enough to replace whatever's being lost with regards to the legacy business?
So the problem with price and volume uptake is that prices come down on day one. Volume uptakes is done script by script gradually. We have seen a fantastic volume uptake with our Wegovy pill. As I mentioned, 170,000 patients in 4 weeks makes the Wegovy pill launch perhaps one of the best, if not the best, pharmaceutical launches we have seen in many, many years, if not forever. But on the other hand, of course, we need to change the perception of our Wegovy injectable, as well as, of course, Ozempic. We're doing that with the launch of Wegovy 7.2 milligram, the high dose one, to try and show that actually our products is on par with our competitor in terms of efficacy when you dose that at a higher level. And that will happen in a couple of months from now. And I look very much forward, of course, as those products make it to the market, that the volume uptakes will come script by script, and then eventually it washes out the price declines that we had initially set, and you see that in the guidance.
With regards to that pathway, though, and keeping the business going, and more importantly, keeping investors happy, do you need to cut costs in a material way, whether it's headcount or other types of administrative costs, to get things in line?
We have always been financial disciplined, and last year we unfortunately had to say goodbye to 9,000 colleagues, mainly because we had foreseen the headwind coming towards us. But having said that, while today you see a negative growth on the financial numbers, I see a lot of positive growth on the other sides of the business. More than ever before, this year we will be producing products. More than ever before. More than ever before, we will be having added patients to our portfolio this year. More than ever before, we will be accelerating and growing our pipeline. So there's a lot of growth into the business that allows us, of course, to continue the investment.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about headcount and specifically some of the management changes that you've been making. Novo recently appointed a new U.S. boss. I take a look. You've also brought in a new product and portfolio strategy lead. Are you done now? Are you happy with the current cast of characters, or should we be expecting more changes as you head deeper into 2026?
Well, I'm not going to break news to you today about future changes, but I have to say the world is changing all the time. I am actually very sad and sorry to see two of my good colleagues leave us, but I'm equally very happy that we have been able to announce their replacement, two incredibly good individuals that will be coming on board, and I look very much looking forward to work with them. As we go forward, of course, changes will always happen, but the main aim is to stay focused with our strategy, stay focused with our transformation, progress the pipeline, and on all of those fronts, we're going to do that with many, many good colleagues that we have around the world.
Well, Mike, if you do want to break news, we'll give you the microphone. But I do want to talk a little bit more about competition, because I mentioned the oral pill. You were first to market there. Eli Lilly is expected on the scene pretty soon. I mentioned the script data showing that your pill is off to a good start. Romaine and I were also speaking to the CEO of Ro last week. He says that the demand for your pill is beyond what anyone expected. But that being said, I mean, do you expect to see this momentum sustained once Eli Lilly actually comes to market? And how can you keep it going?
I would say so. And the reason for it, we have seen within the field of obesity, the magnitude of the weight loss matters. We have a pill that basically reduces your weight by 16.6%. Let's round that up to 17%. Our competitor is bringing a pill that does 12%. So this is a big difference, 16 versus 12. And if, of course, the people living with obesity follow what we have seen the last couple of years, magnitude of weight loss, then we would foresee us having the upper hand on this battle with our good competitor, Eli Lilly.
It raises a lot of questions, though, Mike, about how you sort of broaden, if at all, this business. Is there sort of an expectation, a ballast, if you will, beyond just diabetes and weight loss?
Right now, we are focusing on diabetes, weight loss, and overweight. And the main reason for it is that the combinations of these three areas basically has 2 billion people in the world suffering from it. This is a very large number of people with unmet need, and we are only scratching the surface.
But can meeting the needs of those 2 billion people, though, be profitable? I mean, you started off in major markets like the U.S., where you had a little bit more pricing power. You're losing, obviously, some of your patent protection. I am curious as you expand into other markets, is the profitability proposition going to be the same?
If we would not basically see this as a profitable business, we would not have it as the core part of our strategy. We do see that there is still a lot of profit to be made, albeit, of course, at lower price levels. But the volumes are very large, and I would say the segmentation of the population will differ. There will be different pricing levels depending on the different portfolio, different products that we want to have in our portfolio. And as a focused company that mainly goes into diabetes and obesity, we're going to basically cater to all different segments of the populations with different price levels.
All right, Mike, well, we really appreciate you coming on here fresh off of your earnings. Mike Doustdar, of course, is the CEO of Novo Nordisk. Those ADRs here in the U.S. now down about 14%. You're watching Bloomberg.